Welcome to this, the second in a series of short videos where we take a look at different aspects of Borrisoleigh history uh, from times gone by. And here we see what were the two primary schools of the parish, and at the top the girls' convent school in Palace Street, and underneath then the boys' primary school in Upper Street. But it was in the convent school that boys and girls began their first 2 years of primary education in the classes of babies and senior infants. And when my generation began there, my peers, we began under the stewardship of Sister Francis. And actually it was there that three of the boys of that class of senior infants, where we met our first communion. We happened to be a few days over the requisite age, and it was all important that we did not delay another year before receiving the sacraments of confession and communion. I can't personally remember much about the confession or the first communion, but I can remember a very important aspect prior to confession, and that was examining our conscience. And Sister Francis, she distributed chairs around the classroom, and we knelt down facing the backs of the chairs, and we had the arduous task of examining our conscience. And to a casual observer, I say it must have sounded like a nest of honeybees with all the buzzing as we tried our mind to recall what sins we have committed, since far back as we could remember. One of these occasions, and we examined our conscience, this whole class examined our conscience, a hand shot up midway through this relentless buzzing, and a certain young lady, she informed Sister Francis that she could hear somebody else, she could hear their sins. So the miscreant was brought out, and duly given a good hiding to taught their ways, like their sins were private, and should have been not for the ears of the general public. However, the informer, I think, was kind of take that to word. There was perhaps a case of coming maybe from a position of greater valuation than the misfortunate poor person whose sins were supposed to be heard by the whole class. Underneath was the primary school, the boys' primary school. It started out life as a girls' school, but no girls ever attended there. The boys' school was in the Bandroom Lane in Chapel Street, and this school was built as a female school. But in the meantime, the Sisters of Mercy came to Borrisoleigh, and they provided their own school there but would have in latter years been the veterinary centre. The teachers that I can remember there would have been upstairs a Michael Burke from Kerry, a John Kelly, a Nina man, if I recall, a Jerry Carroll, I think he was from Killinowell, PJ Harrington of Upper Church, and John Brennan of Drum. Underneath then were classes, the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth classes, where I can remember Mr. Barrow, Dick Barrow, a Cork man, Mikey Maher, and Mick Small. I suppose a mixture of the good, the bad, and the ugly. You take your own pick with whichever category you want to assign to any of them. Here, in these 5 premises, have one thing in common, and at some stage each of these was a draper shop. And on the top left, Winnie Fahy in Chapel Street in Borrisoleigh. Winnie carried on a thriving trade in the shop there, drapery shop. It was also the place where Santa Claus stored his ties prior to Christmas. So to be generally maybe sometime after the fair day of Boris, that the rumour would shoot up that the ties had arrived in Winnie Fahy's, and there'd be appointments made for a general viewing. They would. Next, in the middle at the top, was Rita the Wire. Rita the Wire, later she married Jack Hackett, and they carried on a thriving business, drapery business there also. In the next one, on the right hand side at the top, John Kearney's wife, Bressa Kearney, operated there for some time, as also selling clothing. On the bottom left was Teresa Shea's Drapers, and it was an old traditional shop. It was a drapery of many years standing. And on the bottom right, Ryan Roaches, again, carried on a trade there for many years in Borrisoleigh. For quite a number of years, three of those shops conducted business simultaneously. Ryan Roaches, Rita the Wires, and Winnie Fahy's, and it just shows the demand there was for their wares back in those years. When long before the days of mass imports or discount stores or whatever, all those places, they all conducted a good lively trade. Here, what today is Derry Burke's pub. In 1832, it was where the revenue police were housed, and the revenue police were referred to as the poteen house heirs. So their job was to clamp down on the illicit brewing of poteen and such like. And there was a brewery in Borrisoleigh and also a distillery, and it was their responsibility to make sure that the proper records were kept. In 1837, Sub-Inspector Wilkins had a cause to deal with the local parish priest, Father Morris. Father Morris was fined in the local court the sum of £100, which was a huge sum of money in 1837 for having a quantity of illicit whiskey in his house, and also for having that whiskey without a proper permit. The same day, Wilkins proceeded to Thurles, and there he put a number of illicit stills out of action. At the turn of the century, it was where a man, Tommy Kelly, who was a teacher in Coolderry, he conducted business there, and Kelly was married to a sister of Bishop Joseph Shanahan's. When he sold the pub, it was bought by Bart Chadwick, and Connie the Wire, Fish Mike, Connie used to be telling me about Bart Chadwick. He several of more than 3 pints. That was the triple X porter he sold, and that was so strong that if it was capable of sticking the glass to the counter. Connie also told me that a great change, much to his disappointment, took place in the course of the Great War, sometime between 1914 and 1918, where, as Connie put it, the gravity of the porter was lowered. On the lane beside us what we would call the Bandroom Lane, and up there was the Bandroom Hall. And the story concerning that was, as often happened, one night there was a row there, and around the hall, and found its way onto the laneway, and Burke's door on the side of the lane was hit a number of times, and the Burke's bar emptied for people to go to see what was going on, what was happening. And amongst the people who were in the bar that evening was Tommy Dunn of Carrigean, and all the people went out to satisfy their curiosity, and they came back, and Derry Burke's mother, Sarah Burke, among them, and Tommy was still sitting drinking his pint at the counter, and she said to Tommy, "God, Tommy, you never went out to see what was going on." And Tommy said, "No need, Sarah," he said. "I'm sure," he says, "I won't have to sit here too long and I know all about it." No wonder Tommy was called the quiet man. Here, where the entrance is to these this little estate of houses in Upper Street, beside the old boys' school, was where Johnny Gray had his garage, and just a little bit outside where Margaret Tracy's house is today, there was petrol pumps, and Johnny Gray carried on a thriving business there, and he was at a time when motor cars were becoming popular, but he also dealt in bicycles as well. And in my younger days, I can recall Mick Devitt, Tom Tracy, and also Jimmy Ryan, presently of the garage, working there in that garage, in Gray's garage. Here, White's shop, and Mrs. White was one of the most kindest, good-natured women I think that God ever put on earth. And back before the days of the cone machine, the ice cream was sold in wafers, and you could have a 6-penny wafer or a 4-penny wafer, and Mrs. White would open the block of ice cream, and she'd get a roller and roll it along the top of the ice cream block, leaving marks on it, and that's how the ice cream was measured. But I don't think she made much money out of the sale of ice cream, because she was pretty generous with her measure, she was. Also, it was a place where lucky bags, and you could buy a 6-penny lucky bag, but there was some of these lucky bags that seemed to be popular at the time, and Mrs. White would be feeling the finger in the bags to see could you get you what you wanted, maybe to lessen the element of luck. But when a life's ladies, in later years, it was the AIB Bank conducted some of their business out of there. Here was where the shop of Mary Smith stood. Three Smiths had shops in Borris: Big Smith, Frank, and Mary. Mary Smith, for just short of 50 years, Frank Kennedy, the chemist, had his dinner there every day that he came to Borrisoleigh, and Frank would arrive at Mary's at 1 o'clock. He'd seat himself in the room after the shop. Mary would have the paper ready for him, and then bring him his dinner. And it was more or less the same ritual every day. Frank would come in and he would say, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Stapleton," and to which Mary would usually reply, "Good afternoon, Mr. Kennedy." For almost 50 years, Mary catered for him there. If I recall, when you would enter the shop, Mary would be at the far end of the kitchen, and to a young person, it seemed like it was half a mile away. And perhaps when you look at the site there, it was quite a distance away, all right, it was. Here, part of what was Finn's house was where the library was stored, and I would recall Peter O'Dwyer of St. Bridget's Villas as the librarian, and I believe at one time Willie Donnelly had the library there as well. And it was a huge resource. You know, this was way before the days of the internet, and days before a lot of people could maybe even afford a daily paper. And at that time, you know, people, quite a amount of books were read going back those years. I often recall my father saying that he used to say when the band, the LDF band, was trained or conducted by a rally. It was a Limerick band, and my father said it was up there. Rally lived with his wife, so there's you know, quite a amount of history in that little place as well. And finally, these two houses, two characters of Borrisoleigh, perhaps long forgotten now. And beside the school, where this house is today, stood the house where John Young, the tailor Young, lived there. The tailor was the man who along with Paddy Dorsey, had the tradition of bringing the cock to the hurling matches. He was an uncle of the great hurler T.O. English, and just a reference I came across a while ago to his father, who was also a tailor, was Mrs. Canby from Killorn. She protested vehemently about the arrest of Young's father in 1920, and he was arrested on suspicion of having a seditious document and was lodged in Clonmel jail. And Mrs. Canby, she protested loudly for his release, which was subsequently granted. And where the other house at the bottom right stands today, that's where Willie Burke of Chapel Street. His brother was Tom Burke, the schoolmaster. He had a brother, Stephen Burke, who drove a steam engine for the council, and Michael Burke, who emigrated to America. A number of letters passed between Tom Burke the schoolmaster, and his brother Michael in America around the time of the War of Independence, and these were intercepted by the censor. But in one of those letters, he was asking his brother Michael that when all the trouble was over in Ireland, that would he take Willie over to America and get him a job on the streetcars. He said there's not much that Willie doesn't know about engines. So the Willie Burke that we would perhaps have known to be hard maybe to reconcile that image. One thing I would recall, on our way home from school, we would pass Willie Burke's door pretty quickly, because what would happen, the door would suddenly open and the contents of the teapot would be thrown across the street, and if you happened to be passing, you were prone to be on the receiving end of that. So thanks for watching this little bit of history, and join us again soon for some more local history, both local events and some of the local characters of times gone by.